Good evening, everybody. I prefer to stand because then I can see you all at the back. For me, staying in the EU has a number of important components. One of the most important is that it's trade, it's business. We are part of the largest trading bloc in the world. It's not just the largest in terms of GDP, it's the largest also in terms of our business, our trade. Something like half our exports of goods and of services goes into the EU. And that's, I think, created a huge difference from the time when I was young. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when we were not in the EU. And I do remember us as very much the sick man of Europe, which is what we were called. And also, in my generation, there was no inward migration. Everybody was leaving, particularly from Liverpool, where I come from originally. And to see, as Mark Carney, who's the head of the Bank of England, has described, to see our country now, one of the most open and dynamic and successful trading businesses in the world, I think is absolutely wonderful. And from that stems a great deal, obviously an enormous number of jobs. Something like 10% of the whole British economy is dependent on the trade that we are doing. But also, of course, from the taxes that come in from all these successful businesses, then we pay for our academics, and we pay for our health service, and we pay our pensions and a whole host of other things. So we should be aware of how significant that is. I heard a lot of talk about how we can do all that trade if we're on the outside, but there's a number of aspects to that. There's an in argument, and there's an out argument, and then there's the transition. And how would you handle the transition? I've not heard any satisfactory comments from many people on the Leave side on that. If we were to tear up the treaties, if we were to tear up not only the treaties that we've got with the EU, but the ones the EU has got with many other organisations, I think there's about 55 of them extant at the moment. If we were to effectively pull out of the negotiations that are going on between the EU and the United States, the EU and India, I can't see that we are going to gain an enormous amount from that. All I can see is there will be a lot of jobs put at risk, and that indeed the only class of job that's going to be increasing in numbers is going to be people in the diplomatic service and the civil service who will be negotiating trade deals in future. So that for me, as a conservative, lifelong conservative, is of overwhelming importance, and I'm very, very disappointed at the tone of much of the debate, particularly on my side, the political divide, when I hear people talking about how sovereignty is important and all the rest of it, because my response to that is sovereignty doesn't pay the rent, sovereignty doesn't put dinner on the table. And sovereignty, when you're a pensioner and you don't need a job, can get in the way of thinking of the jobs and the future of the other generations. I don't think we have the right to decide just for ourselves. I think we have to decide a bit more further ahead. I also have a principle. And the principle is one that goes back to growing up in a city that had been destroyed by war. I was born immediately after the war, but the place was absolute bomb site. It was just awful, and it took a very, very long time. It took many decades before we were able to do something about that and to see it improve. I believe we should be friends with our neighbours. I believe that we should be work closely with our neighbours. It seems to me absolute common sense that we should be discussing with our closest neighbours the issues on politics and economics that we very much have in common. And that seems to me a very good way to proceed. To turn our backs on our neighbours in the way that's being suggested would be not only to our detriment, but to theirs. And I could well imagine that this will bring great joy to some people, led by President Putin, and I frankly don't want to put a smile on President Putin's face. So those for me are the main issues. One thing I can bring to this table, if you like, is long experience of having been an elected member both of local authorities and in Birmingham and in Westminster, and having continued my association as far as I can by still being involved in helping other people get elected. And one of the criticisms is that the EU is not democratic. Well, it wasn't when we started. when we first voted in 1975, there wasn't a European Parliament. It appeared soon afterwards, and it was appointed. And by the time I stood for it in 1994, it was elected. Now it's elected in a way that I thoroughly disapprove of, with party lists and all the rest of it, which is one of the reasons why I haven't stood again. I'm not going to schmooze up a political party in order to get to the top of the list. That's not the way I like to do things. But nonetheless, it is elected and has been granted a lot more powers in the most recent Lisbon Treaty. The Council of Ministers are all heads of government. They are heads of elected government. You've got 28 nations busy discussing with each other how to make things happen. And actually, given that half of our parliament is the unelected House of Lords, all 800 of them, I'd probably shoot the lot given half a chance. I mean, if we're talking about anything being democratic, the House of Lords actually being our lawmakers, our lawgivers, on everything apart from finance, although they stuck their finger in that pie as well. I think it's just outrageous. However, to get any change to that, you'd have to get it through the House of Lords, and I can't see that happening in the short run. It doesn't seem to be a very high priority. But democracy is a wonderful system, and one of the aspects of the referendum that I think matters so much is that we're identifying causes of concern, causes of anguish, anxieties of various kinds at the moment, some of which have nothing to do with Europe, some of which do. And people are concerned about immigration. I'll be very straight with you. My grandfather came 1,000 miles in 1897 to settle in Liverpool. He thought he was in New York. It wasn't until he sort of asked around. He didn't speak any English, so no way he could tell from the accents. But he was a great, great man. And he packed his work ethic in his little bag, and that's what he brought and communicated to all his family. And I am proud of that as part of my background. So I'm more for open borders than for closed ones. And closed ones would mean, I think, that we'd be in really big trouble trying to recruit all the people that we need. When you have a point system, you end up importing more people. The non-EU bit of immigration that we have is actually larger in numbers precisely because employers and so on have to satisfy the visa authorities that these people are needed, and they are. We should also bear in mind that we may have millions of people coming in from the EU. We also have millions going out and living in the EU. Broadly speaking, we import young, healthy people who want to work, and we export large numbers of pensioners. There's 400,000 people in Europe claiming British pensions, and that's fine. They have all the rights and all the rights to healthcare and so on in those countries, and they seem to be very happy there. If we were importing pensioners and getting rid of lots of young people who want to work here, we would be in very, very big trouble. And yet that seems to be a risk that is in the minds of some people. So that's the sort of balance of where I stand. I'm very much campaigning for us to vote in, to stay in. I've laminated some of these, if some of you want to take them with you. I put the Conservative case on the chair there, and I would invite you to consider what we're saying and hopefully vote the right way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Edwina.